There's one trait, just one, that predicts how far you'll go in your career, how much you'll earn, how healthy you'll be, and, on average, how long you'll live. After raw cognitive intelligence, nothing else about your personality comes even close. Not how clever you seem, not how confident you are in meetings, not how likable you are. Psychologists gave it an innocuous sounding name, conscientiousness. At a basic level, conscientiousness is the difference between people who talk about doing something and those who actually do it. People whose word is their commitment, people you never have to chase. Here's something that will make you take notice. A study that followed more than 11,000 adults found that the hard-working, goal-driven side of this trait was linked to roughly a 25% lower risk of dying over the years that followed the study. Not from heroic levels of effort, from the boring stuff, showing up, following through, doing what they said they would do. I'm Dr Nick Keca, and this is episode 2 of our series on the Big 5 personality model. Today, we're talking about the single most powerful personality trait from the perspective of life outcomes. Here's what makes this episode different. Your innate level of intelligence is what it is, but this trait, you can build and develop it to positively impact every aspect of your life. Let me show you the receipts, because this isn't pop psychology, vague clickbait self-help, or just my opinion. This video is based on some of the most heavily replicated evidence-based science in the entire field of psychology. Turning to the world of work first, across almost every job ever studied, labourer to lawyer to chief executive, trait conscientiousness is the most consistent predictor of who will consistently perform at a high level. It's not the flashiest trait, but it is the most reliable over time. In fact, it's often said that conscientiousness is second only to general intelligence in predicting success in life. But unlike intelligence, conscientiousness keeps paying off in roles where what matters most is simply who keeps grinding away, which means the potential benefits are accessible to everybody, not just those lucky enough to be born with a stellar IQ. With regard to schooling and skills development, conscientiousness predicts attainment of grades and qualifications, often better than natural ability does, because the world is full of clever people who never finish anything, and conscientiousness is the trait of finishing. Regarding health, and this gets personal for anyone over 35, conscientious people smoke less, drink less, exercise more, and take fewer stupid risks. A landmark review linked this one trait to nearly every behaviour that negatively affects lifespan, premature aging, and chronic health. Your personality, in part, is a health behaviour. And the big one, how long you live. The most recent major review, published at the end of 2025 and pooling 158 studies, confirms conscientiousness as one of the only 3 traits that independently predict mortality. One classic study tracked nearly 700 men for 65 years and found the same result. Career, money, health, years on the clock. If there's a single dial worth understanding properly, it's this one. So what is conscientiousness, really? Each Big 5 trait describes how you relate to one big thing. Extroversion, how you relate to people. Neuroticism, how you relate to threat. Conscientiousness is how you relate to goals, plans, obligations, and standards. Strip it back and it answers one question other people are quietly asking about you all of the time. Can I rely on this person to follow through? People who are high scorers with this trait tend to set high standards, plan ahead, keep their commitments, and always finish what they start. They're notoriously hard to distract. Conversely, those who are low scorers tend to be disorganised, laid back, easygoing, sometimes careless, brilliant company, but you'd never rely on them with a deadline. Reminding you of the rule from episode 1, personality traits are like a dial, not a tick box. Most of us tend to sit in the middle, strong in some parts and weak in others. One thing that you won't hear in most videos, psychologists still can't fully explain why this trait works as it does. It barely shows up on lab tests of willpower. Put a conscientious person and a disorganized one in front of a standard self-control task, and you often can't tell them apart. Yet out in the real world, across decades, the conscientious person's life goes measurably better. We can see the effect clearly. The engine under the bonnet is still partly a mystery. That's what evidence-based science looks like. Go down one level and the trait splits into two distinct aspects. Learn to identify them and you'll never look at yourself or your colleagues the same way again. The first is industriousness, the engine. An industrious individual carries out his plans, doesn't waste time, stays focused even when the task is dull, and gets finished. Notice the exact wording the research uses. The marker isn't I plan things, it's I carry out my plans. That distinction is everything. Planning is comfortable, it feels like progress while costing nothing, but planning without execution isn't conscientiousness, it's wishful thinking. Industriousness is the bridge between intention and action, and it's a side most associated with performance and life outcomes. The second is orderliness, which relates to structure and rules. An orderly individual keeps things tidy, follows schedules, likes routine, insists on the details, and is genuinely bothered by mess and by people who don't pull their weight. Orderliness is a real asset in complex coordinated work, but it can curdle into fussiness and policing other people's desks. Here's the catch. These two aspects can further deconstruct. You can be a hard-driving, visionary founder, high industriousness, hopeless orderliness, brilliant and chaotic. Or a meticulous operator who keeps everything perfect but never pushes for more. Same name on the label, two completely different people suited to different jobs. So before you call yourself conscientious, ask which engine you're actually running, the drive or the order. If we go one level deeper, the trait opens into 6 facets. 6 dials inside the one big dial. The first 3 are about how you relate to standards. Competence is the quiet, settled belief that you're capable, that you can handle whatever lands in front of you. It's close to genuine confidence in your own ability, and it's a steadying force when under pressure. An individual high in competence doesn't spiral when things go wrong, because somewhere underneath they know they'll cope and they can summon the necessary resources. Conversely, the person low in competence second guesses everything and falls apart under pressure because they lack the necessary resources. Order is tidiness and method in its purest form. The person whose tools are on the shadow board, whose calendar actually means something, who keeps the plan straight while everyone else is firefighting. Brilliant for complex work, a liability if it tips into nitpicking and when they can't let good enough be good enough. And dutifulness is a sense of obligation, whether a promise genuinely binds you or is just words you said just to get someone off your back. This is a bedrock of integrity and of being the kind of person that people can rely on without ever having to check. When someone says his word is his bond, they're describing high dutifulness. And in a world where most people's follow through is patchy, that's quite a superpower. The other 3 facets are the engine of action, how you actually move forward. Achievement striving is related to ambition, the drive to excel, to win, to push past good enough. It's the fuel behind sustained high performance, the thing that gets you out of bed at 5 a.m. to do the work even when nobody's watching. Turn to maximum with nothing to temper it though, it's also the fuel behind workaholism. Winning the career while losing those all-important relationships. Self-discipline is the big one, the heart of the trait. It's the ability to start and to finish, when it's boring, when you'd rather not, when the easy option is glowing on your phone. More than any other facet of personality, it's why conscientious people succeed at school, at work, and in life generally. In plain terms, it's doing the thing you said you'd do after the feeling that made you say it has worn off. And here's the hopeful part. Of all the facets of your personality, this is the one you can train the most. Deliberation is thinking before you act, weighing the consequences instead of swinging at the first impulse. The person who reads the contract, sleeps on the big decision, doesn't fire off the angry email. Why does this carve-up matter? Because the facets come apart. Most people screen for the wrong one. The person required to execute a flawless launch under a brutal deadline needs self-discipline and deliberation. The individual who pursues an audacious target needs to be achievement-driven. Same trait on paper, different people altogether. If you hire one when you actually need the other, you'll be left wondering how someone so conscientious could let you down so badly. Now the part nobody tells you. More conscientiousness is not always better. That's because the relationship between conscientiousness and performance outcomes isn't linear, it's curvilinear. The sweet spot for consistently high performance outcomes is a moderately high level of conscientiousness, but definitely not maxed out. Push past that peak and those strengths invert. Order hardens into rigidity, an inability to adapt when a plan needs to change, or when good enough, delivered Friday, beats perfect, delivered never. Achievement striving tips into workaholism. The person who measures their entire worth in terms of output and they can't switch off. And dutifulness becomes an inability to say no, so the most conscientious man in the building quietly drowns under everyone else's commitments, runs themselves into the ground and burns out. They're also usually the last to admit it, because admitting it feels like failing at the one thing they're good at. At the far extremes, these traits can manifest as a clinical pathology, and rigid, perfectionistic, everything in its place pattern psychiatry calls obsessive-compulsive personality, and it's a particular trap in leadership. The leader whose orderliness can't tolerate any deviation, who needs every job done exactly their way, doesn't tend to be a great leader, because real people and real businesses are messy, dynamic, and constantly changing. So, if you're high in this trait facet, and if you're watching a psychology video at the end of a long day, you probably are, your growth opportunity isn't more discipline, it's the harder skill of knowing when to stop polishing and deliver. Of all of the big 5 traits, conscientiousness, and the self-discipline facet in particular, is among the most responsive to deliberate change effort. The problem is that almost everyone goes about it in the wrong way and is disappointed by the lack of progress. It's not about summoning more motivation. Motivation is like weather, it rolls in and rolls out. Disciplined people have learned not to depend on it. If your plan only works on the days you feel like it, you don't have a plan, you have a mood. The conscientious result comes from developing systems that don't rely on how you feel. Lay out your clothing and kit the night before so the morning version of you has no decision to make. Write one clear next action. Open the spreadsheet, fill for row 1. Instead of a vague work on finances, fix a deadline and commit in front of a witness, because promises made to another person have more teeth than the promises you make to yourself. Remember the deep principle from episode 1. Situations beat willpower. You don't become disciplined by gritting your teeth harder in the moment. You become disciplined by designing the moment in advance, so the disciplined thing is also the easy thing. That's a learnable skill, and it's the beating heart of the series this whole program is building towards: personality change. Conscientiousness doesn't just shape your life, it shapes everyone on your team. And here's something my own research turned up that most managers don't necessarily understand. When you build a team, the instinct is to chase the highest average conscientiousness you can. Stack the team with diligent people and average it up. But what matters more is the variance between individuals, how much each team member differs from one another in the level of conscientiousness. A team where every member has broadly the same level of conscientiousness will consistently achieve high performance. Mixed team members where the variance in conscientiousness is great, either high or low, and you get a failing team that eventually falls apart. Picture an 8-man rowing crew. If one crew member stops pulling, the free rider, the others will carry him for a while. But when the most conscientious rowers notice, something very human kicks in. Why am I breaking my back while he coasts and we cross the line together? So, to restore some rough fairness, they ease off too. Psychologists call this the sucker effect. Nobody wants to be a mug. The slack spreads from one oar to the next across the whole crew and the boat slows. The term for this is moral disengagement. But here's the harsh reality. Negative behaviour travels faster through the group than positive behaviour. One person's withdrawal is more contagious than another person's extra effort. So the rule for anyone who leads a team is this: build for consistency, not the highest possible average, and where you can't avoid a mix, make the standard and its consequences visible so diligent individuals don't never feel like mugs. One more practical lever, whether you're managing a team or just yourself. Conscientiousness is a latent tendency. It doesn't fire automatically. It switches on when the situation gives it the right cues. A clear goal, a visible standard, real accountability, a deadline with an actual consequence attached. Strip those cues away, as remote work, vague briefs and flexible deadlines so often do, and even genuinely conscientious people start to drift. That's not a character flaw, it's a predictable result of a weak situation, exactly as we discussed in the last episode. If you build the situational cues back in, you'll activate the trait-related behaviour. If you have a leadership role, your real job is less about hunting for disciplined people and more about designing situations where discipline is a path of least resistance. And as a parting gift, if you're trying to read this trait in yourself or someone else, conscientiousness is one of the few traits other people can see and rate accurately, because your follow-through is visible to everyone who's ever depended on you. So, if you really want to know where you stand, don't just take a quiz, ask the colleagues and friends and partners who've relied on you. Their reading is often more accurate than your own. So, here's a chance to quickly self-audit. First, are you more the industrious type, all engine maybe a bit chaotic, or the orderly type, all structure maybe short on fire? Most people clearly lean one way or the other. Knowing which of these is prominent will help you understand the sorts of jobs you'll be most happy and successful doing. Second, and a little harder, wherever you're strong in terms of these facets, does it tip over the peak? Where does your discipline curdle into rigidity, your high standards tip into perfectionism that stop you delivering, your sense of duty into the inability to say no that's burning you out? The goal is never to max the dial on this trait, it's to find the moderately high sweet spot and to spot where your greatest strengths start to cost you. As a quick reminder before we go, this is a map, not a verdict. Understanding where you sit on this trait is the start of an honest conversation with yourself, never a label, and everything here is intended to educate, not diagnose. If you're curious about assessing your personality, go to my website and take a free personality assessment. In the next episode, we move to the traits that decide who walks into the room and owns it, and why that's not necessarily the same as who's actually good at the job. Extroversion. If you've ever watched a confident public speaker get promoted over a quiet genius, you already know it matters. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe so the next episode finds you, and tell me in the comments which side you're on, industrious or orderly. I'm Dr Nick Keca, and I'll see you in episode 3.